The frozen wind cut through Isaac Carmichael's coat like 1,000 knives as he urged his horse along the ridge above the Arkansas River. Certain he would die alone in these Colorado mountains, just like he had lived for the past 37 years. December of 1876 had brought the worst cold he could remember, and the ice forming along the river's edge gleamed dangerously in the late afternoon sun as he made his way back toward Central City with supplies he had picked up from the trading post 15 miles south. The sound reached him before the sight, a sharp crack like a rifle shot echoing across the valley, and Isaac pulled his chestnut mare to a halt, scanning the riverbank below. Movement caught his eye, dark fabric against white ice, and then he saw her, a woman flailing in the water where the ice had broken through, her screams thin and desperate in the cold air. Without thinking, Isaac spurred his horse down the slope, his heart hammering in his chest as he calculated how little time she had before the freezing water claimed her life. He dismounted before his mare even stopped, his boots sliding on the icy rocks as he ran toward the river's edge. The woman's face was pale as death itself, her lips already turning blue as she struggled to grab onto the broken ice that kept crumbling under her gloved fingers. She wore a traveling dress, now soaked and heavy, dragging her down despite her attempts to stay afloat. "Hold on," Isaac shouted, throwing off his heavy coat and looking around frantically for something to extend to her. His rope was still on his saddle, and he sprinted back to grab it, his fingers clumsy with cold and urgency as he uncoiled the lariat. The woman's struggles were growing weaker, her movements more sluggish, and Isaac knew she had minutes at most before the cold stopped her heart. He formed a loop and threw it toward her, but she was too weak to grab it. Cursing, Isaac tied one end around a sturdy cottonwood tree and wrapped the other end around his waist. The water would be agonizing, but there was no other choice. He waded in, gasping as the cold hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath and making his muscles seize. The current was stronger than it looked, pulling at his legs as he pushed forward, using the rope as a guide. "I'm coming," he called out, though his voice shook with cold. The woman's eyes met his, dark and terrified, and she tried to say something but her teeth were chattering too hard. Isaac reached her just as she started to slip under, grabbing her arm and pulling her against his chest. She was small, barely reaching his shoulder, and he could feel her shaking violently against him. Getting back to shore was harder than getting in. The woman was deadweight now, unable to help herself, and Isaac had to use the rope to pull them both back while fighting the current and the ice forming on his own clothes. His legs were going numb, and dark spots danced at the edges of his vision, but he kept moving, one painful step at a time, until his boots found purchase on the rocky shore. He hauled them both onto dry land and immediately began working to get the woman out of her wet clothes. Propriety was a luxury neither of them could afford right now. Her eyes were half closed, her skin frighteningly pale, and Isaac knew he had to get her warm, or she would die right here on this riverbank. He stripped off her soaked coat and the outer layer of her dress, then wrapped her in his own dry coat and the blanket from his saddle. "Stay with me," he said urgently, patting her cheek gently. "Don't you dare die on me now. What's your name?" Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Isaac rubbed her arms vigorously, trying to get her blood moving. Finally, she managed to whisper, "Amelia, Amelia Vance." "Well, Amelia Vance, I'm Isaac Carmichael, and we need to get you somewhere warm before we both freeze to death." He looked at his mare, then at Amelia, calculating. She could not ride alone in her condition, which meant they would have to ride together. His own clothes were soaked through as well, and he could feel the cold seeping deep into his bones. He managed to get Amelia into the saddle, then pulled himself up behind her, wrapping one arm around her waist to keep her upright while he took the reins with the other. She slumped against him, still shaking, and Isaac urged his mare into a quick trot back up the ridge. His cabin was only 2 miles away, tucked into a small valley where he had lived alone for the past 15 years, ever since he had given up trying to find gold and started raising horses instead. The ride felt endless. Isaac's teeth chattered so hard he thought they might break, and his hands were clumsy on the reins. Amelia drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling words he could not quite make out. He kept talking to her, forcing her to stay awake, asking her questions even when she could not answer. "Where were you headed? What were you doing out here alone?" His voice was rough with cold, but he kept going. "Come on, Amelia, talk to me. Tell me something, anything." She stirred against him, her head rolling against his shoulder. "Running," she whispered. "Had to run." Isaac wanted to ask more, but his cabin came into view, and he focused all his energy on getting them inside. He practically fell off the horse, then caught Amelia as she slid from the saddle. She could not walk, so he lifted her in his arms and carried her to the door, kicking it open and bringing her into the dim interior. The cabin was cold, the fire having died hours ago, but it was shelter from the wind. Isaac laid Amelia on his bed, then moved quickly to get a fire going in the stone fireplace. His hands shook so badly he could barely strike the flint, but finally the kindling caught, and small flames began to grow. He added larger pieces of wood, building the fire up until heat began to radiate into the room. Only then did he turn his attention back to Amelia. She was still shaking, her wet hair plastered to her face, and he knew they were not out of danger yet. He found dry clothes, his own shirt and pants that would be far too large for her but were better than her soaked dress. Turning his back to give her what privacy he could, he said, "You need to get out of those wet clothes. Can you manage, or do you need help?" There was no answer, and when he looked over his shoulder, he saw that she had passed out. Cursing under his breath, Isaac moved to the bed and began the awkward task of undressing an unconscious woman, keeping his eyes averted as much as possible while removing her wet things and replacing them with his dry shirt. Her skin was ice cold to the touch, and he wrapped her in every blanket he owned before stripping off his own wet clothes and changing into dry ones. He pulled a chair close to the fire and sat down heavily, exhaustion washing over him. His whole body ached from the cold, and his hands were starting to burn as feeling returned to them. He watched Amelia's still form on the bed, looking for the rise and fall of her chest, reassured only when he could see she was still breathing. As the cabin warmed and the immediate crisis passed, Isaac's mind began to work again. Who was Amelia Vance, and why had she been crossing that river in December? The nearest town in that direction was a rough mining camp 20 miles south, no place for a woman traveling alone. And she had said she was running. From what? Or from whom? The questions would have to wait. Isaac built up the fire more, then heated water to make coffee and some broth. He had not saved her from the river only to let her die from the cold in his cabin. Every so often he checked on her, feeling her forehead for fever and making sure the blankets were tucked around her. Her color was slowly improving, the deathly pallor giving way to a more natural tone, though she remained deeply asleep. Night fell, and Isaac made himself eat some bread and dried meat, though he had little appetite. He kept the fire burning bright and warm, adding wood whenever the flames began to die down. His own exhaustion pulled at him, but he fought to stay awake, unwilling to leave Amelia unattended. He dozed in the chair, waking periodically to check the fire and his unexpected guest. It was near dawn when Amelia finally stirred. Isaac was awake instantly, moving to the bedside as her eyes fluttered open. She looked confused at first, her gaze moving around the unfamiliar cabin before landing on him. Recognition sparked in her dark brown eyes, and she tried to sit up, wincing. "Easy," Isaac said gently, putting a hand on her shoulder. "You are safe. You are in my cabin about 2 miles from where I pulled you out of the river yesterday. How do you feel?" Amelia sank back against the pillows, her hand going to her head. "Like I was trampled by a horse," she admitted, her voice hoarse, "but alive thanks to you." She looked down at herself, seeing his oversized shirt and color flooded her cheeks. "Did you? Your clothes were soaked," Isaac said matter-of-factly, though he felt his own face warm. "You would have died from the cold. I tried to be respectful." "Thank you," she said quietly, meeting his eyes, "for everything, for saving my life." Isaac nodded, feeling awkward. He was not used to gratitude or much conversation at all. "Are you hungry? I have broth and I can make some eggs." "Broth sounds wonderful." Amelia tried to sit up again, and this time Isaac helped her, propping pillows behind her back. She accepted the warm cup he handed her, wrapping her hands around it and breathing in the steam. "I should explain," she began, but Isaac shook his head. "You should rest. Explanations can wait until you are stronger." But even as he said it, curiosity gnawed at him. This woman had appeared in his solitary life like a bolt of lightning, and he found himself wanting to know everything about her. Amelia sipped the broth, and some color returned to her face. "I need to tell you," she insisted. "You saved my life. You deserve to know why I was out there." She took a deep breath, and Isaac saw her hands tremble slightly on the cup. "I was running away from my husband." The words hung in the air between them. Isaac felt something sink in his chest. Of course she was married. A woman like her, beautiful even half frozen and wearing his clothes, would not be alone in the world. "I see," he said carefully. "Will he be looking for you?" "Thomas is dead," Amelia said flatly. "He died 3 weeks ago. But his brother, Edward, claimed I owed him for the care Thomas had received during his illness. He said I had to marry him to pay the debt, or he would have me arrested for theft of the money he had spent on Thomas." Isaac's jaw tightened. "That is not legal. You cannot be forced to marry to pay a debt that was not even yours." "I know that," Amelia said, her voice bitter. "But Edward has friends in Black Hawk, and I am just a widow with no family and no money. Who would believe me over him?" I tried to refuse, but he grew more insistent, more threatening. Finally, I gathered what little I had and fled. I was trying to reach Denver, where I have a friend from before I married Thomas. But the stagecoach road was blocked by snow, so I tried to cross the river on the ice. Her voice broke. "Stupid. I was stupid and desperate." "You were brave," Isaac corrected gently. "It takes courage to run, to choose an uncertain future over a certain prison." He understood that choice more than she knew. He had made a similar 1 year ago, leaving behind his family's expectations, and a life mapped out for him to find his own way in the frontier. Amelia looked at him, surprise flickering in her eyes. Most people would say a woman should accept her lot, be grateful for any man willing to take her. "Most people are fools," Isaac said bluntly. "No one should be forced into marriage." He stood, feeling suddenly restless. "You are welcome to stay here until you are recovered enough to travel. Then I will help you get to Denver if that is where you want to go." "I have no money to pay you," Amelia said quietly. "I did not ask for payment." Isaac moved to the stove, busying himself with making eggs to avoid her searching gaze. "It is the right thing to do." They fell into silence, but it was not uncomfortable. Isaac cooked while Amelia finished her broth, and when he brought her a plate of eggs and more bread, she ate hungrily. Color continued to return to her face, and her hands were steadier. She was stronger than she looked, Isaac thought. The river and the cold should have killed her, but here she was, Already recovering over the next few days, a routine developed. Isaac tended to his horses and did his daily work while Amelia rested and regained her strength. Her clothes had been ruined by the river, so she continued to wear his shirts and had fashioned his extra pants into something that fit her well enough with a belt and rolled cuffs. She insisted on helping around the cabin despite his protests, mending his clothes that had long needed attention and cooking meals that were far better than his usual simple fare. They talked as they worked, tentative at first, then with growing ease. Isaac found himself telling her things he had never spoken aloud, about his childhood in Boston, the son of a successful banker who had expected Isaac to follow in his footsteps. About how he had felt suffocated by that life, by the social expectations and the endless business dealings that seemed to care more for profit than for people. How he had left at 22, breaking his father's heart and his mother's social standing, to head west and find something real. "Do you regret it?" Amelia asked one evening as they sat by the fire. She was mending one of his shirts, her needle moving with practiced efficiency. Isaac considered the question. "Sometimes I regret the pain I caused them, but I do not regret the choice. I could not live that life. It would have killed something essential in me." He looked at her. "Do you regret marrying Thomas?" Amelia's hand stilled on the fabric. "I regret not seeing who he really was before I married him. He seemed kind when we met, attentive and caring, but after the wedding he changed. Or perhaps he simply stopped pretending." She resumed her sewing, her voice quiet. "He was not cruel exactly, but he was cold, distant. I was more like a housekeeper than a wife. When he got sick, I cared for him because it was my duty, but I felt relief when he died, and that makes me a terrible person." "It makes you human," Isaac said. "We cannot control what we feel, only what we do about it." She looked up at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "How is it that you understand so much, living out here alone?" "Maybe because I live out here alone," Isaac said with a slight smile. "I have had a lot of time to think." "Does it not get lonely?" Amelia asked softly. Isaac met her gaze and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of shared isolation. "Yes," he admitted, "it does." The days turned into a week and then two. The weather remained bitterly cold, with several snowstorms that would have made travel to Denver impossible even if Amelia had been ready to leave. But Isaac found he was in no hurry to see her go. The cabin felt different with her in it, warmer somehow despite the winter cold outside. Her presence filled spaces he had not realized were empty, her voice chasing away the silence he had grown so accustomed to. Amelia seemed in no hurry to leave either. She grew stronger each day, helping with more tasks around the cabin and even venturing outside to feed the chickens Isaac kept in a small coop. She had a way with his horses, particularly his mare, speaking to them softly and moving around them with confidence. One afternoon, Isaac looked up from mucking out a stall to find her standing in the doorway of the barn, watching him work. "Will you teach me to ride properly?" she asked. "Thomas never allowed it. He said it was not appropriate for a lady." Isaac straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cold. "Nothing inappropriate about a woman knowing how to ride. It is a necessary skill out here." So they began daily riding lessons. Amelia proved to be a natural, her initial nervousness giving way to genuine enjoyment as she learned to guide the horse and move with its rhythm. Isaac found himself looking forward to these lessons more than he cared to admit, watching the joy on her face as she grew more confident, hearing her laugh when the horse did something unexpected. It was during one of these lessons, on a bright afternoon in early January, that everything changed. They had ridden out to a meadow Isaac knew, where the snow lay pristine and white under a brilliant blue sky. Amelia had done well, handling her mount with increasing skill, and they had stopped to rest the horses and taken the view. "It is beautiful here," Amelia said, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "I can see why you chose this life." Isaac looked at her instead of the landscape. The cold had brought color to her cheeks, and her dark hair, which had grown loose from its braid, curled around her face in the wind. She was beautiful, and the realization hit him like a physical blow. Somewhere in the past 2 weeks, this woman had become essential to him. The thought of her leaving, of returning to his solitary life, was suddenly unbearable. "Amelia," he began, then stopped, not sure how to put his feelings into words. He had spent so long alone, had convinced himself he preferred it that way, that he did not need anyone. But that had been a lie he told himself to make the loneliness bearable. She turned to look at him, and something in his expression made her eyes widen. "Isaac, I do not want you to go to Denver," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "I know I have no right to ask you to stay, that you barely know me, but these past weeks, having you here, it has made me realize how empty my life was before. You make everything better, brighter. I know it is too soon, that you have just escaped one bad marriage, and I am just a horse rancher living in the middle of nowhere, but I cannot let you leave without telling you that I have fallen in love with you." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Amelia stared at him, her expression unreadable, and Isaac felt his heart hammering in his chest. He had ruined everything, spoken too soon, asked for too much. She would leave now, and he would be alone again, but this time the loneliness would be so much worse because he would know what he was missing. Then Amelia smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I do not want to go to Denver either," she said softly. "I have been trying to convince myself I should, that it is the right thing to do, the proper thing. But I do not care about proper anymore. I care about you. These weeks here have been the happiest of my adult life. You see me, Isaac, really see me, not as a possession or a duty, but as a person. You listen when I talk, value my opinions. You make me laugh, and somewhere along the way I fell in love with you too." Isaac felt like he could not breathe. "You love me." "I love you," Amelia confirmed, moving closer to him. "I know it is fast. I know we should be sensible and wait, but I am tired of being sensible. I was sensible when I married Thomas, and it made me miserable. My heart tells me this is right, and for the first time in my life, I want to trust my heart." Isaac reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks gently. "Are you sure? Life here is hard. Winters are long and cold, and I am not a rich man. I can provide for you, but it will not be an easy life." "I do not want easy," Amelia said, covering his hands with her own. "I want real. I want to wake up every morning next to someone who loves me, who sees me as a partner. I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like." Isaac kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that quickly deepened as weeks of restrained feelings poured out. Amelia melted against him, her arms wrapping around his neck as his encircled her waist. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not because you have to, not because of duty or debt, but because you want to. Be my wife, my partner, my love." "Yes," Amelia whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." They rode back to the cabin in a state of euphoria, plans already forming. They would have to wait until spring to travel to Central City for a proper wedding, but Isaac did not care about the wait. Amelia was staying, choosing to be with him, and that was everything. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Amelia asked, "What changed your life, Isaac? Before me, I mean. You said you have been alone for 15 years. Why?" Isaac was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I suppose I was hiding," he admitted. From my family's expectations, from the pain of disappointing them, from the fear that I had made a terrible mistake leaving. It was easier to be alone than to risk being hurt or hurting someone else. But hiding is not the same as living, and you have reminded me of that. You have given me the courage to stop hiding and start truly living. Amelia took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. You gave me that same gift. With Thomas, I felt like I was disappearing, becoming smaller and smaller until there was almost nothing left of who I really was. But you have helped me find myself again. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire, and Isaac marveled at how much his life had changed in just a few short weeks. He had gone to that trading post expecting nothing more than another lonely winter. Instead, he had found the person who made him whole. The winter months passed in a blur of happiness. Isaac taught Amelia everything about running the ranch, and she proved to be an eager student, learning quickly and contributing ideas of her own. She suggested they raise chickens for eggs to sell in Central City, and under her care, the small flock grew. She also had a talent for breaking young horses, her patient, gentle approach complementing Isaac's more direct methods. They made plans for their future, talking late into the night about expanding the ranch, maybe adding cattle to go with the horses. Amelia wanted a garden in the spring, and Isaac promised to build her raised beds and a small greenhouse. They talked about children too, both wanting a family but agreeing to wait a bit, to have time as just the two of them first. As winter gave way to early spring, they made the journey to Central City. The town was bustling, full of miners and merchants, and Isaac felt Amelia tense beside him as they rode down the main street. He knew she was worried about running into someone who knew Edward, but he kept a protective hand on her back as they made their way to the small church. The minister, Reverend Thompson, was a kind man in his 50s who agreed to marry them without fanfare. They had no guests, but Isaac did not care. All that mattered was Amelia, standing beside him in a simple blue dress she had made from fabric they had bought at the general store, saying the words that would bind them together. I, Amelia Rose Vance, take you, Isaac James Carmichael, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part. Isaac repeated his own vows, his voice strong and clear, meaning every word. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed Amelia with all the love in his heart, and she kissed him back with equal passion. They spent their wedding night in a hotel in Central City, a luxury after months in the cabin, but both were eager to return home. Home. The word had new meaning now. It was not just a place but a feeling, the warmth of being with the person you loved. As spring truly arrived, the ranch came alive. Amelia's garden flourished and the horses thrived under their combined care. They worked side by side every day, talking and laughing, building a life together. At night, they fell into bed exhausted but content, wrapped in each other's arms. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Amelia turned to Isaac with a particular glow in her eyes. I have something to tell you, she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. We are going to have a baby. Isaac felt joy surge through him so powerfully he thought his heart might burst. Truly, you are certain, truly, Amelia confirmed, laughing at his expression. Are you happy? Happy does not begin to cover it, Isaac said, pulling her into his arms. You have given me everything I never knew I needed. A home, love, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive. The months of Amelia's pregnancy were some of the happiest of Isaac's life. He hovered over her constantly, worried about her health, but she laughed at his concern and continued to work alongside him, though he insisted she take on lighter tasks as her belly grew. They spent the evenings planning for the baby, converting the small storage room into a nursery and making tiny clothes that Isaac could barely believe would fit an actual human being. In early January, almost exactly a year after Isaac had pulled Amelia from that frozen river, their son was born. The birth was hard, and there were moments when Isaac feared he might lose both Amelia and the baby. But she was strong, pushing through the pain with a determination that left him in awe. When the midwife they had brought from Central City finally placed the squalling infant in his arms, Isaac wept openly. "He is perfect," he whispered, looking down at the tiny red face. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Amelia asked weakly from the bed, exhausted but smiling. Isaac thought of the frozen river, the moment that had changed both their lives, the harsh December that had brought them together. "What about River?" he suggested. "River James Carmichael." Amelia's smile widened. "River, I love it. It is perfect." Fatherhood transformed Isaac in ways he had not expected. He had always been responsible, hard-working, but now every decision was filtered through the lens of what was best for his family. He worked harder than ever, expanding the ranch and building their savings, wanting to ensure Amelia and River would always be provided for. River grew into a bright, curious toddler who followed Isaac everywhere, his chubby legs working hard to keep up with his father's long strides. He had Amelia's dark eyes and Isaac's sandy brown hair, and his laughter filled the cabin with joy. Amelia proved to be a wonderful mother, patient and loving but firm when needed, and Isaac fell more in love with her every day watching her with their son. When River was 3, Amelia became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and when their daughter was born on a warm June morning, the birth was quick and relatively simple. They named her Lily Grace, and she was the image of her mother, with the same delicate features and dark hair. The years flowed by like the river that had brought them together. Isaac and Amelia grew the ranch into one of the most successful in the area, known for their quality horses and fair dealings. River grew into a strong, responsible young man who loved working with the horses as much as his father did, while Lily proved to have her mother's head for business, keeping meticulous records and negotiating prices that often surprised the buyers who underestimated her. There were challenges, of course. A particularly harsh winter when they lost several horses to disease, a summer of drought that made water scarce and tested their resilience. The time River broke his arm falling from a horse and scared them all half to death. But through every hardship, Isaac and Amelia faced it together, their love deepening with each passing year. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Amelia back to the meadow where he had first told her he loved her. It was early January, the same time of year they had met, and fresh snow blanketed the ground. They had left the ranch in River's capable hands for the afternoon, Lily having insisted they needed time alone. "You remember?" Isaac asked, taking both of Amelia's hands in his. Though they were both in their 50s now, gray threading through their hair and lines marking their faces, Amelia was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "How could I forget?" Amelia said, smiling up at him. "This is where you told me you loved me, where you asked me to stay." "Best decision I ever made," Isaac said. "Well, second best. The best was pulling you out of that river." Amelia laughed, the sound as bright as it had been 20 years ago. "I think about that sometimes, about how close I came to dying that day. How different everything would be if you had not come along when you did." "I think about it too," Isaac admitted. "I was so lonely before you, Amelia. I had convinced myself I was content, but I was just existing, not really living. You changed everything." You gave me a reason to live, not just exist. You gave me love, family, purpose, joy. Everything good in my life traces back to that frozen river and the moment I saw you fighting to survive. We saved each other that day, Amelia said softly. You pulled me from the river, but I was drowning long before the ice broke. I was drowning in a life that was not mine, in expectations and duties that crushed who I really was. You gave me the space to be myself, to grow, to thrive. You saw me, really saw me, and loved what you saw. That was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. Isaac pulled her close, kissing her with all the love and passion that 20 years had not diminished but only intensified. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Here is to 20 more years, Isaac said. At least 20 more, Amelia agreed. They walked back to their horses hand in hand, comfortable in the silence that came from truly knowing another person. As they rode home, Isaac looked out at the ranch that they had built together, at the life they had created from nothing but determination and love, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. That night, after a celebratory dinner that Lily and River had prepared, complete with a cake that was slightly lopsided but made with love, Isaac and Amelia lay in bed in each other's arms, talking quietly. What would you say to that frightened woman in the river if you could talk to her now? Isaac asked. Amelia thought about it. I would tell her not to be afraid, that the ice breaking was the best thing that could have happened to her. I would tell her that she was about to meet the love of her life, that she was going to be happier than she ever imagined possible. I would tell her to trust her heart. She turned to look at him. What would you say to the lonely cowboy on that ridge? I would tell him to ride faster, Isaac said with a smile, that his whole life was waiting for him at the bottom of that slope and every second mattered. I would tell him that he was not as alone as he thought, that love was coming for him in the form of a stubborn woman who refused to give up even when the odds were against her. He stroked her hair gently. I would tell him that saving her would save him too. They fell asleep that way, wrapped around each other, hearts beating in tandem after 20 years of marriage. Outside, snow began to fall gently, covering the ranch in fresh white, the same kind of snow that had been falling the day Isaac pulled Amelia from the river and changed both their lives forever. The years continued to pass. River married a sweet woman named Clara from Central City, and they gave Isaac and Amelia 3 grandchildren who filled the ranch with noise and laughter. Lily married a doctor named Samuel, who had come west to serve the mining communities, and they settled in Central City, but visited often, eventually adding 2 more grandchildren to the growing family. Isaac and Amelia grew old together, their bodies slowing but their love never wavering. They still took rides together when weather permitted, still sat by the fire in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. The ranch eventually passed to River, who ran it with the same dedication his father had shown, while Lily and Samuel opened a clinic in Central City that served rich and poor alike. On a cold December morning in 1906, 30 years after that fateful day at the river, Isaac woke to find Amelia watching him, a soft smile on her lined face. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep and age. "About how lucky I am," Amelia said. 30 years ago today, I went through the ice on that river, certain I was going to die. Instead, I found life. Real life, full and rich and beautiful. I found you." Isaac reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining automatically, a gesture repeated thousands of times over 3 decades. "I am the lucky one. You turned my lonely existence into a life worth living." "We were both lucky," Amelia said firmly. "Lucky to find each other, lucky to have the courage to choose love, lucky to have built this beautiful life together." They spent the day quietly, surrounded by their children and grandchildren who had gathered to celebrate the anniversary of the day Isaac and Amelia met. There was food and laughter, stories shared and memories recounted. River told his children about how brave their grandmother had been, fighting to stay alive in that frozen water. Lily talked about how her father had ridden down that slope without hesitation, risking his own life to save a stranger. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ranch, Isaac and Amelia stood on the porch together, watching their family through the window. The grandchildren were playing some game that involved a lot of running and shrieking, while their parents tried unsuccessfully to calm them down. "We did well," Isaac said, his arm around Amelia's shoulders. "We did very well," Amelia agreed, leaning into him. "Look at them all, so full of life and love. This is our legacy, Isaac. Not just the ranch or the money we have saved, but this. Family. Love. The knowledge that we built something lasting and good." Isaac turned her to face him, cupping her weathered face in his hands just as he had done in that meadow so many years ago. "I love you, Amelia Carmichael. I have loved you from the moment I saw you fighting for your life in that river, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you, Isaac Carmichael," Amelia said, tears shining in her eyes. "You were my salvation in every way that matters. You gave me freedom, love, partnership, family. You gave me myself. I could never repay that debt." "There is no debt between us," Isaac said firmly. "Only love. Always love." They kissed then, a gentle press of lips that held 30 years of love, of shared joys and sorrows, of partnership and passion. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. Inside, their family continued to laugh and play, secure in the love that Isaac and Amelia had built and the foundation they had laid. The ranch would continue, passing from generation to generation. The story of the cowboy who pulled a drowning woman from a frozen river and found love would be told and retold, becoming part of family legend. But for Isaac and Amelia, standing on that porch in the fading light of a December day, the story was not a legend. It was their life, their truth, their greatest gift. They had found each other against all odds, had chosen love when it would have been easier to choose safety, and had built something beautiful from the ashes of their former lonely lives. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Isaac and Amelia went back inside to join their family, their hands clasped tightly together. Outside, snow began to fall again, just as it had on so many December days before, covering the ranch in pristine white and promising that tomorrow would bring a fresh start. The years that followed were gentle ones. Isaac and Amelia slowed down, content to watch their children and grandchildren run the ranch and build their own lives. They took short rides when the weather was fine, worked in the garden together, and spent long evenings by the fire, comfortable in the companionship that came from a lifetime together. Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep on a warm summer night in 1912, just shy of his 73rd birthday. Amelia woke to find him still and cold beside her, and though she knew her heart should be breaking, she felt only gratitude for the 36 years they had shared. He had lived a full life, surrounded by love, and had died peacefully. It was more than many could hope for. The funeral was attended by everyone in the area, testament to the life Isaac had lived and the respect he had earned. River spoke about his father's dedication to family, his integrity in business, his kindness to all who knew him. Lily talked about how her father had taught her that love was the foundation of everything worthwhile. And Amelia, though she did not speak publicly, whispered her own goodbye as they lowered Isaac into the ground. "Thank you, my love," she said softly. "Thank you for riding down that ridge, for pulling me from the river, for loving me so completely. Wait for me. I will join you soon enough, and we will have forever together." Amelia lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, an active and beloved presence in all their lives. She told them stories of the old days, of the Wild West when Central City was a booming mining town and the frontier was still being tamed. She told them about their grandfather, about his courage and kindness, his quiet strength and deep capacity for love. On a cold January morning in 1917, exactly 41 years after Isaac had pulled her from that frozen river, Amelia Carmichael closed her eyes for the last time. She died peacefully, sitting in the chair by the fire where she and Isaac had spent so many evenings, a smile on her face as if she could see something beautiful that no one else could perceive. They buried her next to Isaac, and on the headstone River had erected, he had written simply, "Amelia Rose Carmichael, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She was saved from a frozen river and saved her Savior in return. Together always." The ranch continued to thrive under River's management and eventually passed to his eldest son. The story of Isaac and Amelia became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. Their love story became a touchstone, a reminder that real love exists, that two people can find each other against all odds and build something beautiful together. And on cold December days, when snow fell softly on the Colorado mountains and ice formed along the edges of the Arkansas River, descendants of Isaac and Amelia would look out at that water and remember. They would remember the cowboy who rode down a ridge to save a drowning woman. They would remember the woman who had the courage to run from a life that was not hers and the wisdom to recognize true love when she found it. They would remember that sometimes the moments that change our lives come when we least expect them, and that love, real love, is worth fighting for. The cabin where it all began still stood for many years, preserved by the family as a memorial to Isaac and Amelia. Eventually, it was converted into a small museum, and visitors would come to see where the famous love story had unfolded. They would look at the simple furniture, the stone fireplace, the bedroom where River and Lily had been born, and marvel that such an extraordinary love had bloomed in such an ordinary place. But those who knew the truth understood that there was nothing ordinary about what Isaac and Amelia had shared. Theirs was a love born of courage and desperation, nurtured by respect and partnership, deepened by time and shared experience. It was a love that had created a legacy, not just in the children and grandchildren who carried their blood, but in the example they had set of what marriage could be when built on a foundation of true friendship and unwavering devotion. The frozen river that had nearly claimed Amelia's life had instead become the birthplace of a love that spanned decades and touched generations. It was proof that sometimes the worst moments of our lives, the times when we are most desperate and afraid, can become doorways to our greatest happiness. All it takes is the courage to fight for survival, the wisdom to recognize love when it appears, and the bravery to choose it even when the future is uncertain. Isaac and Amelia had possessed all of that and more. They had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, had chosen each other despite every logical reason not to, and had built a life together that became the stuff of legend. Their story endured because it spoke to a fundamental truth that every human heart recognizes, that we are all looking for someone who sees us, truly sees us, and loves what they find. That we all long for a partnership where we can be fully ourselves, where we are valued and cherished, where we belong. Isaac and Amelia had given that to each other, and in doing so, had created something immortal. Long after the ranch passed out of family hands, Long after the cabin museum closed and the headstones weathered with age, their story lived on. It lived in the family stories passed down through generations, in the old photographs that showed a handsome cowboy and a beautiful woman standing together, love evident in every line of their bodies. It lived in the land itself, in the mountains and the river, in the valley where they had built their home. And on cold December days, when the wind howled through the Colorado mountains and ice formed on the Arkansas River, if you listened carefully, you might hear the echo of hoofbeats as a cowboy rode down a ridge to save a drowning woman. You might hear her grateful voice and his steady reassurance. You might feel the warmth of the love they built together, a warmth that defied the winter cold and endured beyond death itself. That was the true legacy of Isaac and Amelia Carmichael. Not the ranch or the money or even the children and grandchildren, though all of those were important. Their true legacy was the proof they offered that love exists, that it can be found in the most unexpected places, and that when nurtured with care and commitment, it can grow into something that outlasts our mortal lives. They had found each other on a frozen river in December, and what she told him that day, her story of running and desperation and hope, had indeed changed his lonely life. But he had changed hers too, and together they had created something beautiful that would never truly die.